Parashat Mishpatim. Listen while you drive, listen while you walk. So if a man sells his daughter to be a maidservant, that's in Shemot 21:7. The laws of Jewish slaves are difficult to deal with, especially for women. So we wonder how it can be fair that a father has the right to sell his daughter to become a maidservant. Which transgression made her deserve such a degrading position? It is, however, an unfortunate fact of life that the social position of parents often affects their children. So now let's look at the Hebrew maidservant. Ralbag explains that a man is not allowed to sell his daughter unless he has absolutely no other way to support himself. Rambam concurs that the father may only sell his daughter in case he becomes so destitute that he loses all of his possessions, including the shirt off of his back. Although he sold her because of destitution, the father should be forced to redeem her and avoid a blemish on the family. According to Rashi, the father dealt deceitfully with her by selling her to a man who was unwilling to marry her when she reached maturity. Her father would therefore not be permitted to sell her again. This is alluded to in the end of the following verse, seeing that he has dealt deceitfully with her in Shemot 21:8, which, according to the simple meaning, refers to the master who neglected his moral obligation to marry his maidservant. Rashi adds that he could also refer to the father. Me'am Loez agrees and explains that the father behaved in an extremely cruel way. He should rather become a stone carrier to avoid selling his own. So he should carry stones to avoid selling his own daughter. That's what it says. So the Mincha Belula notes that our verse calls the father a man because he does not deserve the title father, since he had no mercy on his daughter. He treated her as a stranger, contrary to what is expected of a father. Now let's look at a protection for the daughter. Now, if selling one's daughter as a maidservant is such an act of cruelty, then why does the Torah permit it in the first place? Okay, so perhaps the laws of the maidservant are intended to protect a daughter. When a father is not in a position to support her, he has the opportunity to hand her over for somebody else to care for her who will provide for her. So the law of slaves ensure that the master treats her exactly as his own daughter, providing her with the same standard of beds, clothing, and food. So the master is also not allowed to make her do degrading kinds of work such as tying shoes. So when she reaches maturity, the man who took her in as a maidservant is expected to either marry her himself or marry her off to his son. Upon marriage, the Torah makes clear that she receives the exact same rights as a free woman. So if he has brought her, if he has, agreed to marry her off to his own son, he shall do unto her after the manner of daughters. And this is in Shemot 21:9. So let us imagine what would happen in biblical times to a poor girl without this social institution. Let's see, she might die of starvation or have degraded herself to searching for potato peels in the garbage. What would come about this girl? Who would want to marry her if they saw her like this in rags, and then they're not going to receive a dowry for her? So becoming a maidservant protected her from having to sleep on hard straw mats and washing toilet seats until the end of her life. So that's protection for the daughter, and that's why they did it that way. And it says the duties, let's look at the duties of the husband. It says, if he takes another wife, her food, she'era, her clothing, and her conjugal rights, he shall not diminish. And that's in Shemot 21:10. Rashi explains that this verse refers to the son who has agreed to marry his father's maidservant. If he takes a free woman as an additional wife, he is not allowed to diminish the marital rights of the former maidservant. So the word she'era, which Rashi translates as food, literally means flesh. The reason it is called she'era, according to Ibn Ezra, is that the food maintains the flesh of the body. This verse is the source of the Torah obligation that a man must provide his wife with food, clothing, and conjugal rights. Rambam, however, disagrees and insists that Scripture intended food. So if it said that if it really meant that word meant food, that it would have used the word lechem, bread, which is usually a way of referring to food. Therefore, he holds the obligation of the husband to provide sustenance for his wife, and that, he says, is only rabbinical. So the word she'era refers instead, according to the Rambam, to closeness of the flesh. This implies that a man is not allowed to treat his wife in a way of the Persians who live together while being fully dressed. The Jewish way of intimacy involves closeness of bodies without the interference of clothing. Okay, so the maidservant's equal status. So Rabbi S.R. Hirsch notes that the only place in the Torah that mentions the obligations of the husband towards his wife is regarding the maidservant. So the Torah purposely defines the elementary rights of Jewish wives through the example of women from the lowest rung. The child of a beggar compelled to sell his daughter as a slave to save her from starvation. The maidservant, disdainfully refused by her master, now becomes the wife of his son. When she is placed beside an ordinary bride, a girl married out of a free rich family, the Torah proclaims, not by one hair's breadth may the treatment of the one differ from that given to the other. So the Torah singles out this case as an example of general rights of a married woman in order to teach the following principle. With marriage, a woman rises to her husband's station in life, but never falls from hers. So whether she brought a dowry of gold and silver or came to him as the tattered, naked child of a beggar, she has the right to be treated according to a station in life. She is treated even higher. If she was used to a higher standard of living than her husband, then the husband is obligated to treat her at that same standard. And this also goes back, if we look at the 613, and it says that you have to have equal weights and equal measures. So basically it's a form of justice, and that's how Hashem is. That's how we have to practice that. And the Gemara also says that a husband should give his wife and treat her above that of himself. So let's look at marital intimacy, the right of a wife. So having intimacy with her husband is the right of every wife. According to the Rambam, a man who marries a Jewish woman is prohibited from causing his wife pain by withholding any of her three basic rights. So the Shulchan Aruch teaches that if a husband withholds physical intimacy from his wife, he transgressions the Torah injunction, her conjugal rights. He shall not diminish. And this is so it says that even if he doesn't intend to hurt her, but his business trips prevent him from having intimacy with her according to prescribed times, he is not transgressing the Torah injunction. So those are commentaries that says that he's not transgressing if it was impossible for him to do that, because it wasn't intentional. So in our modern society, sex is usually regarded as something the woman gives to her husband. The fact that the marital intimacy is the right of the wife and not vice versa teaches us an important principle about the Torah's attitude towards physical relationships. Although the man may have a greater sexual desire, living with his wife should be an unselfish act of giving in order to satisfy her need. Most women do not detach sexuality from emotional and spiritual closeness. This is why women rarely use harlots. By commanding the man to direct his sexuality towards satisfying the desire of his wife, the Torah ensures that intimacy between husband and wife reaches beyond the physical. Only when the woman holds the key to marital intimacy can the holy union between husband and wife encompass all levels of reality, including the physical, emotional, and the spiritual. So now we're going to look at Parashat Teruma in the next video. Shavua Tov.